It was almost like my whole childhood was like one big lesson of like how not to fucking live your life. So it was like instead of being programmed to do all the shit that your parents did, like, that's people when you grow up in that, there's statistics say you're more likely to follow in some of your parents' footsteps if you're surrounded by it all the time. But for me, I just hated it. I hated that lifestyle. I hated what I saw. So I knew everything what not to do. I just didn't know how to do all the right things effectively. So for me, it was just learning to communicate and be a better communicator. And be instead of being reactive to things, um, you just had to learn to respond to them in a different way. So that's for me. That's I'm thankful. It sounds ridiculous, but I'm thankful for that shit that I went through because I don't think I would be here today if it wasn't for it.
Austin, welcome.
What's
Uh,
up, guys? Thanks for having me.
you're welcome. Austin, who are you? Where are you? What do you do?
Yeah, so I am a business owner, entrepreneur. Currently 38 years old. I live just outside of Nashville, Tennessee. Have multiple businesses, but my main company is a sports nutrition company called Nutrifitt. I launched that brand end of 2017, right after I got out of college, and have grown it to to this day. Now we have went through rebrands and stuff over the years, but we have taken that from a concept, an idea in college, when I had $100 in my pocket at the time, and have turned it into a global brand that's in multiple countries, and we're continuing to grow. Apart from the business side of things, husband, father, me and my wife combined have 4 kids, blended family. So I have two, she has two, and we have a house full of teenagers. So that's,
Great, great.
you know, uh, that's a challenge in itself.
What lit the fire under your ass as a college student to spend your $100?
Oh man. So, I have a lot. That's a good question. I have a lot of people ask me this because, I guess we'll get into it on the podcast, but with my background, I didn't come from a wealthy family. So I tell people, when you start off and there's a saying, I didn't have a pot to piss in, that was pretty much the case. I did go through a divorce during college. So that, all the funds that I did have had went towards that and was fighting for custody of the kids for multiple years. So, man, I got to a point to where I didn't have a choice. For me, growing up and the life and the things that I experienced, it taught me everything in the world that I shouldn't do or that I was not going to do because I was so sick of, living that way for so many years growing up that in my mind, I just I didn't see that there was another path for me but to figure it out and to succeed.
What was that your childhood experience like? What were some of the things, if you don't mind us asking, that like sort of inspired you to take this alternative path?
Uh, well, man, it's a lot of it. I think just the struggle, seeing financial struggle, growing up. Um, never had a nice home or anything. We jumped around. When my parents divorced, it was either we're at this apartment or in this trailer park, all over the place with my mom, and then had to deal with a ton of, you know, um, as a kid, 6, 7 years old, that shit leaves trauma on you when you see abusive relationships and you see your mom getting beat. Um, so yeah, I mean, it was that. It was not having like a solid family home. Not being able to do the things you wanted to do, not being able to go on vacations like some of your friends were doing. So all that over the years for me was just like the driving force. And then when I ended up having kids of my own, I made a promise, hey, like I'm never going to put my kids through the same shit that I had to go through and that I had to see.
Was your dad in your life?
He was actually, yeah. So my relationship with my dad is fantastic. I do not have a relationship with my mother anymore at all. Just choices that she's made. But me and my dad talk, almost every single day. Have a great relationship with him. But when after my parents divorced, it was just tough. The way we moved all the time with my mom, I didn't see him as much as I wanted to. But when I got in 15, 16 years old, I ended up moving in with him. So a lot changed as I got older. But I'm thankful for where we're at today.
Statistics are not good for young men who grow up in a split home. My youth was not too dissimilar from yours. Maybe not quite as bad, but very similar. And the struggles that come along with judgment, decision making process, having a value system whenever you're young. It's a really difficult thing to have that internal compass whenever you've had input that doesn't necessarily support that. So sounds like you beat the odds on that a little bit. Do you think having a relationship with your dad was a factor in that?
I think it was. And for me too, even not as a child, but when I got into my teenage years, I would seek out people that I wanted to eventually be like. There was a guy, I still remember his name, Eddie Johnson, that, he owned a medical company and was really successful with it. And I would meet him when I was 16 or 17. We would have lunch, two or three times a week. And I would talk to him about where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do. And that was crucial for me, just to kind of have that mentor in my life going through that. Because while my dad and like my grandparents on his side, they were great. They were the family, the only family that I really had that I could count on at the time. But when it comes to business things, I had to seek those elsewhere to just, get more knowledge from someone who'd been where I wanted to go.
So you were business minded as a teenager.
Yeah, I was. I was. I had what I'm trying to think to see what the first thing it kind of it goes into supplements, so it's kind of funny. The first business that I ever had, the first job, like retail job I had, was at a vitamin shop, and I was 16, and I noticed at the time a lot of guys would come in there and they're buying these test boosters, and they'd come in every month, they get a different one because they didn't like it. So I started researching and I started making my own and ended up selling that. So that was like my first little venture into the supplement space and kind of how I got hooked on it. So yeah, I mean, I've always had that bug to work on my own, to do, something on my own instead of working for somebody the rest of my life, just because, there's just for me, I just don't want to work my entire life for somebody else and then retire and have 10 years to live.
Yeah.
There's no freedom in that. And I think that's what a lot of people are looking for these days, are freedom, and they just don't know how to find it.
I want to jump back and ask you, because I'm just personally very curious about what the process of making your own supplement is like, particularly at that phase where, like, how do you even start that?
So when I was first doing it, I was doing it totally incorrectly because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I'll just talk about, from the way I started my company. Like, I went to college for chemistry and nutrition and dietetics. So my main goal going into college at the time was like, hey, I want to be a sports dietitian, potentially work with an NFL team or something of that nature. But I had a job in college for in the food science lab, so I had access to a ton of super expensive equipment, and had the idea to start creating my own product line. So I would, after hours at the university, I would actually work in the lab. I would formulate, flavor, do all the things, blend it up in like a little small B blender they had, and then I would give samples out to guys on the football team. So that's kind of how I really got started into it. And then, from that point, once I realized, hey, like this concept will work, I'm getting good feedback, let's take it to the next level. Then that's a different ball game when you actually start getting into legitimate brand building and formulation and compliant manufacturing. It's a lot to learn. But I've been in it for so long now, like I wouldn't change it for nothing. I love it. I'll be in the industry. Even if I sell the brand, I'll still do something in this industry, forever.
What age were you whenever you were really taking that step of like regulation and like really taking that step to this is a serious business?
I would say, um, so I got, an equity partner who's my main investor for the startup in 2016. So I'd been pitching this idea since, I started on it in 2013, in the fall of 2013 is when I come up with the idea and really started working on it for 4 years before we even, had a business name or launched or anything. So it took a while to even get it off the ground because it was all bootstrapped initially. Um, but once we had the capital to move forward with the products and the brand, that's when you had to search out a co-manufacturer. You have to go through product formulations. You have to make sure you're meeting spec compliance. It's a ton of stuff to it. And I went and visited multiple facilities. The first one we went to is I think 80 something thousand square foot facility. So it was a massive manufacturing facility. So that was a side of the industry that I had no clue about initially. But there is a lot that goes into making a product, especially if you're doing it correctly. Now, anybody can make a product. I mean, you can make something up in your kitchen, but is it compliant? Is it going to meet label specs? Is it safe to take? Is the question.
I imagine that's a fairly daunting prospect to just, it's hard enough to acquire the knowledge, to have the motivation to try, to go through all of the steps just to initiate, but then going from, okay, I know how to do it, to passing through what I assume is quite a lot of red tape and a whole bunch of hard barriers of growth and getting people to fund you and making partnerships and stuff like that. That's the part that would seem almost impossible to me. And certainly, whenever I was the age that you were, I don't know if I would have had the courage to stand up to that.
Yeah, I mean it's tough. Thankfully I have and what you guys will know in business, if you don't have good partners, you're going to have a bad business the majority of the time, or it makes your headaches a lot worse. So I have really great partners. My main business partner in Nutrifitt has been, I've known him since I was 15. So I'm 38 now. So uh, it was, I met with him for 4 years, and it was usually every month or every other month. And I would just update him what I was doing. He wanted, he made me do business plans. I had to prove that, I knew what I was doing. Which for me, looking back, I can't tell you how many business plans I turned into him, and I highly doubt he even looked at all of them. I think it was a part. He's like, let me see if he's actually going to do it. Um, and I'll never forget when we launched. He told me, he was like, "Hey, look, I'm not investing in the brand or the product. I'm investing in you because I've seen what you've done over the 4 years, and like I know that you're going to be successful. So just stay with it." So that was cool for me. Hearing that from somebody that I looked up to and respected meant more than, hey, here's a check, go get product.
How do you feel that you evolved your like? So we in business we talk about the relationship component and how valuable and how important that is, and how bad partners can really challenge, make a bad situation worse or make a good situation bad. So when you talked about growing up and having a challenging relationship with your mother, how did you over time like learn how to develop better and healthier relationships that could then transform into your other personal relationships, business relationships, etc.?
I don't think that, even though I grew up in that environment, I think the hardest thing for me was just learning to communicate more effectively. And I've never had a problem, creating conversation or making friends with people or connecting on some level. Uh, because it's kind of like what I went back to earlier. It's like I don't know, and I'm thankful that I guess my brain processed all the shit that happened the way it did. But it was almost like my whole childhood was like one big lesson of like how not to fucking live your life. So it was like, instead of being programmed to do all the shit that your parents did, like, that's people, when you grow up in that, there's statistics say you're more likely to follow in some of your parents' footsteps if you're surrounded by it all the time. But for me, I just hated it. I hated that lifestyle. I hated what I saw. So I knew everything what not to do. I just didn't know how to do all the right things effectively. So for me, it was just learning to communicate and be a better communicator. And be instead of being reactive to things, um, you just had to learn to respond to them in a different way. So that's for me. That's I'm thankful. It sounds ridiculous, but I'm thankful for that shit that I went through because I don't think I would be here today if it wasn't for it.
How many people work for Nutrifit?
So we don't have any like on staff employees. We do, we work with, external like subcontractors, but if you're counting those around 10.
That's quite a lift for a brand of that size to make that happen. How does that how is that connected like with that small number of people? Like how are you how does that brand work like that?
It's not as difficult as you would think. Uh, it's for me, it's systems. So we have certain systems in place that have been built to just almost work on autopilot. Let's say, for example, when I started this company, there was a point to where every time we would have a product made, it's getting shipped to me. So I had a room in my house where I stored everything. I had to package everything. I had to ship everything. I had to put all the, or I mean, I was doing every single thing for a business by myself. And you're talking, and I did that for 3 years after we launched, and that gets super taxing. I mean, you're working, I don't know, 60 plus hours a week, and then when you're in that, you're like, holy shit, maybe a job would have been better because all I do is work. But as we've grown, it's been great for me. Our brand is more vertically integrated now. So I work directly with our manufacturing company. I also manage multiple other brands and help them with manufacturing as well. So all our products are made in the same place, they're stored in the same place, and they're fulfilled from the same place now. So realistically, I don't have to touch any product when it comes to manufacturing, shipping, fulfillment, all that's taken care of. And it's just like in one big, process, which is fantastic. For me now, currently, it's just developing, greater relationships and growing the brand. I'm still heavily involved in like product design and formulation. I'm not our graphic designer. I have someone who does that, but the inspiration that comes for the brand or the labels or the design, I work, hand in hand with my graphic designer. We create those. I create the formulas, and then I have a marketing team that runs our website, that does all our ads, all our graphics, and all that stuff. So it's not as difficult as you think. There's a lot of people involved, a lot of different moving parts, but compared to when I was doing it all myself, it's a night and day difference.
So you said that your part of your responsibility is building the relationships to help grow the brand. What kind of relationships are those for a company like yours?
Yeah, so at our level now, it's two different levels. I mean, one, it's on your consumer level. So you have to develop relationships with your customer, whether that be through their experience, through your customer service, through interaction, through your like affiliate and your athletes. That's another team too that I involve myself into to let them know, hey, you're not just talking to a bot. Like I'm the person who started and owned the company. Here's my number. So it's being accessible to people to let them know, hey, there's a real person behind this brand and this company. And then on the higher level, it's getting introduced, starting conversations with distributors in the states and other parts of the world. Like we're currently in Australia, Canada, Mexico, Poland, UK. So we're working with Vietnam now, India, potentially Dubai and Japan. So there's a lot going on that you have to kind of manage. But so in terms of relationships, it's pretty vast.
I'm curious to know in these years, like you talked about connecting with people who you didn't use this language, but people who maybe were mentors for you, and examples. In these many years, have you interacted with younger people or young entrepreneurs, startup people, and seen the younger version of you out there? Do you have those sorts of interactions with people?
I do, yeah, and it's great because I'm really humble, knowing from where I've come from, and I don't view what I've done yet. Like I still have a whole lot to do and a long way to go. There's a ton of shit that I still want to accomplish, and I'm still nowhere close to where I eventually want to be. But yes, it's great when I get a DM from someone who's wanting to start a company or someone that's 19 or 20, they're like, hey, like you're crushing it. Like this is inspiring to see what you've done. And I'm just like, that's fucking awesome because I know how it was for me, and that first mentor I had, it was difficult. It's difficult to throw yourself out there when you know someone has accomplished something and you're almost scared they're not gonna give you the time of day or they'll blow you off. And you're like, why would they want to talk to me? What can I offer them? I'm not gonna increase anything for them. But if that is you, you just got to have the courage to ask people, and you're going to get told no. I mean, I still connect with people and ask people, for advice, and sometimes you will not get a response depending on where they're at in their business, and that's just it is what it is, man. But you got to have the courage to be told no and then keep asking. But it's great, and getting involved in business groups with guys who are trying to do the same thing, build a company, entrepreneurs. That's been probably one of the best things for me is just networking with like-minded individuals. You have to put yourself in those circles. You just have to.
Where do you think most people in the early stages fail?
There's so many ways. So I'll give an example. So I had a skincare company that I started way before the supplement thing. Um, Always kind of been like a chemistry nerd. So that did really well for me, but my problem was I got hyper focused on trying to create as many cool products as I could, and I dropped a bunch of money into building out, like, let's say, a product line, and I had 2 products that sold really well.
Hmm.
So I went broke and couldn't afford to produce the products that were actually selling, so spent all my money making stuff. So as a young entrepreneur, I think when you don't have guidance and you're trying to do your stuff yourself, you're you're almost destined to fail because I just mismanaged the whole aspect of how to run a company. And that just goes into not, surrounding yourself with people who can be like, hey, like, dumbass, don't do this. You need to do this, this, and this, or focus on this first, get this going, and then think about what you need to do next. So that's key. I think when you get started, if you don't have good advisors or you don't have someone to lean on for advice on what to do, you just it's like shooting in the dark.
There's a fine line between having the confidence to strike out or strike forth, having the belief in yourself that you can accomplish the thing, but then also having the wisdom and humility, particularly at a young age, to be told you're wrong about a whole bunch of stuff, and being willing to do something in a completely different way based on someone else's opinion. And particularly when you've put your last $100 in it, it comes with a little bit of terror of trusting that somebody else is telling you what to do when they don't stand to lose their last $100 if it's wrong.
Yeah, it's tough. I'll tell people all the time, like, entrepreneurship is a daily battle with yourself. Because still to this day, it'll be like, I'll have a month where, I'm crushing it. Business is well into, doing 6 figures. And then you'll have a month to where it's like your revenue's down like 50%.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh fuck, and you question yourself, you question everything you're doing. You worry about what's going to happen. And that's something that you kind of have to prepare yourself for. I think for eternity, as an entrepreneur, and that's why you really need to have people in your circle that you can reach out to, be like, hey guys, look, like this happened. I'm really struggling with it. Any advice would be great. And you have to be you have to be willing, like you said, to accept, criticism from people. And that's tough, especially if you're younger and you have a big ego, and you don't want people telling you what to do. And hell, becoming an entrepreneur, one reason a lot of people do that is because you don't want to have to answer to somebody all the time. So
Right, right.
it's something that you have to be like, hey, look, okay, if I'm gonna get to this level or this level, maybe I do need some help. And being able to realize that, maybe sometimes you're just not going to be able to do everything on your own, uh, is the case, and that's okay. Like you have to come to that decision. Like, hey, it's okay to ask for help.
So even after everything that you've personally accomplished, you still have those days where you're questioning whether you know what you're doing.
Oh yeah, all the time, all the time. And it's not that I don't have confidence in myself, but I think it's just the reality of you can have everything one day and then the next day it can all be gone. That's just the truth. Whether that comes to your finances or your family or even your life, you just don't ever know. So, uh, if you struggle with that, and I personally do, having people around you to talk to you about it is crucial to making sure you don't like end up in a bad spot and start making stupid decisions.
So it sounds to me like you're a person who is very open with the people he's got in his life, which is a very healthy mindset to have. I think that anybody who can sort of share what's going on inside of them and absorb what is happening outside of them, you're going to end up having a little bit more of a balanced outlook on life, and you're going to have a little more even keel as you try to traverse through life. Does that affect does that openness affect the way that you choose people to be on your team? Like, are you seeking people who can match you with that sort of like give and take and confidence and vulnerability and humility and all of that sort of stuff? Is that something you actively look for, or is that too granular?
No, so it's difficult when you're bringing and the team that I've worked with. When I'm talking about the 10 people kind of on board, like I've worked with the majority of these people for 5+ years. So our relationship is fantastic. We can talk about our family. We can talk about this. Like you'll call and talk to them. Their kid will be sick in the hospital, and you're calling and asking them how they are. You know what I'm saying? So it's not a surface level relationship. As far as the people that work in the company or my partners or whatever. So that's fantastic. Now, when it comes to building out the team, let's say when athletes and affiliates, and you're getting in the hundreds of people, that's extremely difficult. But yes, we do go through a process of trying to vet who we bring on to make sure they're a decent person. And doing that, through a phone call or social media is extremely difficult at times because you don't know someone fully. But when it comes to just, surrounding yourself with people or who you engage with or communicate with, I think you have to do that, and that takes time because, for me, I've had some really bad people that I've been involved with that you have to kind of remove from your life if you want to continue to grow. But yeah, I mean, I think that's key for anybody. Like if you want to continue to elevate your life, you need to have people who kind of have the same ideals as you do. And character is a huge thing.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've relied on your character to guide you and to make the right decisions. And um, I think that there are a lot of people in the world who can rely on their character to help them make the right decisions, but for them, they don't choose an entrepreneurial course through life. And so that whether nobody's life is simple, nobody's life is easy, but I guess maybe that person doesn't necessarily rely on their character professionally as much. They don't look to their character as a compass in their ability to make money and that sort of thing. And to you, it sounds like you've done a really good job of sort of blending those worlds where, um, other people really just don't have that, aren't faced with that challenge.
Yeah, they're not, and it's still difficult. Like on my just within the last 6 months, uh, we've started doing for the company and myself. Actually, we started doing vlogs. So we're doing what's called an origin story that basically is telling my story, the story of the brand, what the brand mission is, everything. And that was something that I've put off for 3 years because for me, it's just was extremely difficult to be on camera because I was like, I don't know if anybody wants to even see this. Like, why would anybody want to see this?
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I talked to shout out to Kyle Mann, my videographer. That guy pulled me, out of my pit of bullshit and was like, dude, shut the fuck up and just do this. Cause I promise you, like telling the story, it's going to help someone, it's going to resonate with someone. And when we're doing all this footage, it's fantastic. So we've done 3 sessions. We've dropped, I think 2 seasons of the vlog. We're starting season 3 next week. And I haven't had, any type of negative feedback or anything regarding the vlogs. Everybody's loved them. They've shouted out, dude, this is great. This is inspiring. Like, this is awesome. Like, keep doing these. And I'm just like, fuck, man, uh, it's great. It's great to see it. And I'm like, why was I such a dumbass? I should have been doing this for like 2 or 3 years. Um, so yeah, it's hard to be, I guess, fully vulnerable to the world with your story and your video. Uh, but man, if what you've been through or what you put out can just help one person, like ultimately it's worth it. So that's kind of how I've had to, have a mindset shift on throwing myself out there as like the face of the brand.
Yeah, it's in our age, the concept of branding and marketing has become like it's there's a microscope and an X-ray on every brand now, and traditional branding before the past, I don't know, 10 years or something like that, you created a marketing message, you created a brand perception theoretically, and that was, you more or less had some control of what the perception of your brand was through those deliberate means. But in the world we live in now, it's like there's such a human face on every single thing. You can go on social media, see all the people who are involved in a company. You really can see people as actual human beings, not a headshot, not somebody in a suit in a studio environment. And it is a little bit terrifying because if you run a business, like you are aware of how much of a clusterfuck your life is because you're a human being, and B, you have a sense of like, I don't know, maybe it's not the same for your company as it is for ours, but I know that there have been so many times when we narrowly escaped total disaster by just the skin of our asses, and it's like the outward perception never changed. Everybody, thought we know what we're doing and everything's going great, but behind the scenes we were like, we could have been wiped out. We totally would be very embarrassed if anybody knew how that actually went. So it's really scary to open up and let people see him.
Yeah, it is. And no, I've been there too, more than once. I kind of like where you're at that oh shit moment. Like, what are we gonna do? Um, but yeah, it's difficult. It's a different level of openness when you put yourself out publicly. and share your story, or you share stuff behind your business, or it was for me. I'm like, man, what's people going to think? I'm like 38, and a lot of the inspiration that comes from, you know, or for our brand comes from things that interested me growing up, villains and superheroes, comic books. So a lot of that comes the inspiration for product design or names that is pulled, from that part of my life. And, you illogically will be like, oh, someone's going to think that's stupid and comment like you're a dumbass for doing that, like, or that's childish. But dude, everybody has really loved the content, and it's been fantastic. And it's actually went from like daunting to think about doing it to like I'm excited about doing it now. I'm excited to see what the video looks like, how the vlog's going to look. So it changes. And I think it's just a comfort thing, man. Like once you start doing it, and the repetition helps drastically.
In our world, we have attracted a lot of athletes to our followers. We have that sort of kick in the ass, stern, loving father voice, and that really resonates with people who kind of like have to survive by their own performance, and that fits into athletics really well. And so, because of that, just sort of paying attention to a lot of the influencers that we've attracted over the years as followers, there are a lot of people in the supplement space, a lot of brands in the supplement space. It seems like it's a very competitive market. What sort of work do you have to do to like distinguish yourself?
Yeah, and you're right. It is. It's probably one of the most saturated markets there is, especially the niche of supplements that we're in, which is sports nutrition. There's a new brand that pops up every single day. And it's gotten to the point to where, if you have $5,000, you can launch a supplement. So the cost to enter this, or even cheaper than that, if someone goes into it and is like, oh, well, I'm not gonna worry about insurance or none of that, you can get something up $2,000 sometimes. So, but 98% of those brands are not going to be here in a year because of the competitiveness of the market. So, I tell people all the time, yeah, and I'm in the supplement space, but ultimately, it's you're a marketing company. So, like, what are you going to do marketing wise or branding wise to set yourself apart from the other, 100 choices of the same type of product on the shelf? That's the question, because when it comes down to, formulas and stuff, the majority of formulas, people are all using the same stuff. It just is like, there's different dosages of things. You can have like novel, trademarked, patented ingredients, which those are great. But what's going to make someone, when they go into a retail store, they go to your website, why are they going to buy that product? You could have a product with the best formula ever created, but if it looks like complete shit, the likelihood of someone buying it, unless The Rock or somebody's telling you to go get it, is slim to none. So it's just it's customer experience. For me, when it goes into branding and the labels of the products, like what can you do to this container when someone sees it to invoke something like, oh, that's cool, or hide like little gems on the labels that they can find after they get the product. What does the label feel like? What type of emotion does it invoke when they see it? So like, a lot of it, all that stuff goes into product creation and design, kind of like, you guys know that it's like, what are you trying to get out of the consumer? So that part of it, for me, when I launched, I had no concept of that. Like our branding, and I can share it with you, after we get off the podcast, but was atrocious. Like you should have seen some of the shit that we had. It was absolutely terrible. And, looking back, I'm like, I never would have walked into a store and bought that over something that had like a skull on it, that was like 3D on the label. I'd have picked that one because that one's badass. Uh, so yeah, I've kind of evolved into understanding that side of the business. And that part of the business is super fun, super exciting because it's always like, what can we do next? Like on this new product or this special edition, like what can we do to make this label different than anything on the market that nobody has ever seen before? And that's what's super, super fun.
So it's you'd say those 98% of failures are because of poor marketing. Is that the biggest?
I mean, a lot of it is, yeah. Like realistically, a lot of it is like, they put, because it takes time and energy and it takes talent and it takes money. If you're going to do something really good, you're going to have to invest the time and the money and the energy into making it really good. Because I mean, you can have anybody go make your product, but if you're not devoting the time and the energy and the creativity to actually turn something into a brand that people can connect with, you're just throwing your money away, in my opinion. So, for me, it's like, what can we do as a company to evolve to continue to make everything we drop just cool as shit. Like when someone sees it, they're like, my God, like these labels are fucking badass. Like every time they drop something, they got the best labels in the industry. And I hear that. I've heard that from multiple people every time we drop something, like nobody else is doing it better. And it's like, we're nowhere near the top of the food chain for supplement companies. There's companies making 50 plus, 100 million plus a year. And our labels and our design, in my opinion, are crushing those companies. So, it's fun. But that's the cool part of the business.
You have like a 20-year-old on staff watching TikTok and understanding what all of that shit means and like translating that badass label into that media as well.
Actually, my graphic designer is like 42 or 43. So she's older than me. But she's fantastic. I'm probably the best there is when it comes to one of the best there is when it comes to label design and creativity. Um, the TikTok thing is that's another story. I'm really trying to figure the whole TikTok marketing out because the potential there is huge. But like you said, I'm 38 and I'm like, I don't even want to know anything about fucking TikTok. Like, I want someone else to do it. Like when I get on TikTok, I'm looking at funny shit, you know? So
I'm 5 years older than you. I don't look at TikTok at all. That's such an interesting sentiment because that's exactly how we are. Like we're as we're about to at the time of this recording, we've just launched the podcast, and because our team is very small, we have to do things kind of in stages. We can't just do everything at once. We literally just don't have the bandwidth to touch everything at one time. And so we're about to take the steps to jump into TikTok and start putting our media out there. And it's just such an interesting sentiment for, I don't know if it's a generational thing or a cultural thing. I don't know where the line is. There's probably multiple lines. But I just look at TikTok and I'm just like, I put TikTok on my phone for the first time about 2 or 3 weeks ago at this point. I looked at it for 10 seconds and I was like, this is too much. I do not want to look at this. I was overloaded. I closed it immediately. And it's just like, I want nothing to do with it, but you got to. It's just, I don't know what the future holds if we're all going to be relying on TikTok to make a living. It's sad.
yeah, and I've talked to brands who are doing the TikTok marketing with affiliates and UGC content. And I was talking to a guy the other day that owns a brand, and he was like, "Man, you got to get on here and do it." He's like, "We've done 4.3 million in the last 6 months," and I'm just like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, all these young kids making these videos with their iPhones," and I'm like, "Man, that's fantastic." Uh, but
Yeah.
same thing about you. The first time I had TikTok on my phone, I had it on there for maybe a week, and I deleted it, and I'm like, I can't with this shit. And then I have it back now, so I don't know. We'll see. I'm not going to manage it or run it. I'm going to let somebody else do it, and we'll see if it works. If it does, awesome. But yeah, just no interest in it.
our sentiment with social media in general is that if we had achieved multimillionaire status and the ability to retire at our age, we would be off of social media entirely. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Like, I like living in the woods and kind of, in theory, being anonymous, but that's not the right attitude or way to achieve any success in business these days.
It's not, man. And I was the same way. Like I said before, doing those vlogs, I'm like, yeah, I don't have any desire to do vlogs and be on camera and talk about myself. I just don't.
Yeah.
And you just kind of have to look at it as a different way. Be like, don't look at it as you're sitting here talking about yourself. Look at it as what about my story? If someone hears, maybe like, man, I'm so glad I saw this today, or this has helped me so much, or maybe I can do what this person has done if I just keep going. So that's kind of how I've started to change my perspective about being on camera and kind of being the face of the company. It's not a, hey, look how fucking awesome I am. Um, while I'm still super proud of what I've been able to accomplish this far, it's just about, being authentic and letting people know who you are.
Yeah,
And then,
it's
then when you retire, you can still go be a hermit in the woods.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Once you make your millions off of TikTok, then you can delete it. But it's such an interesting to be a part of, like, branding before this massive explosion of social media. I mean, we've had it for a long time, but really in the past 5 years, it has blossomed in a way that I personally would never have thought would happen. And particularly with businesses, the way it's changed branding and infrastructure within marketing and all of that kind of stuff. And our brand is one that, we don't have products on shelves, but we do have a retail side of our business. It's all e-commerce, but so we lack that sort of personal connection where there's a product somewhere and there's a person somewhere and they connect with each other. All of our connections are sort of happening online somewhere. And our brand has had a very personal reaction in a lot of people's minds over the years. And many, many people have reached out to us and shared some really deep stuff, some heartbreaking stuff at times, some really, really personal stuff. And to me, it's always made me a little afraid to step out in the forefront, because it's like, I'm worried I'm going to take that from them a little bit, like they have our business and our brand means something to them, and they've got a perception of what it is. And I'm scared that if we put our faces on it, it's going to take that personal experience from them a little bit, so, but, if we behave like dinosaurs, we'll wind up like the dinosaurs. So, as Brian said, those attitudes aren't necessarily helpful to us.
Yeah, it's true.
So what's would you say that what do you think is your ratio of investment to marketing versus product development?
So I would say, so we started going, the last 2 years as we've really kind of started vamping up, our marketing budget as far as bringing on, ad experts, that type of thing, getting in with Google, meta ads, Instagram, same thing. And now we're doing the TikTok thing starting soon too. So for me, our investment has been super heavy on the actual implementation of like creating the product and the design and all of that, which, I mean, I guess you could throw in design and creativity into marketing because that's part of it. But from an expansion point, way lower and that side of the marketing aspect than just, product development.
Even though that is the major failing point for so many people who are trying to break into your market, it's still the majority of your resources have got to go to product development?
Yeah, when I say that, it's just the majority of resources and this type of business until you get to a point to where I think you're doing multiple millions because you have such a large customer base and you've grown so much that you can dump tons of money into marketing is just the remanufacturing of your products because that's the most expensive cost driver in this type of product based business. um, no, you can tie in marketing into like your packaging and your designs and like all the branding and like all that stuff. But still, I would say company since inception of the company, yeah, we spent way more money on product development than we have on the actual like marketing spend. And when I'm saying marketing spend, I'm talking like, you know, paying for email services, SMS, paid ads, um, you know, the staff to manage and run that stuff. But in the last, 6 months to a year, that budget for that side of the business is continually growing because we've had like good ROAs and everything on Meta and Google. So, and I've purposely scaled that because for me, I didn't want to just start dumping tens of thousands into ad spend and then just lose a bunch of money until we figured out what works. So, for months we'll do like A/B testing or run evergreen static ads or do UGC and we'll just see, what we're getting, like what are we getting on like acquisition ads versus retargeting. And that's just allowed us to continue to scale our budget on spend and maintain, growth with our ROAs, like blended ROAs from month to month. Because, a lot of companies that I've talked to, like, oh, yeah, we're spending 5K a month and we're getting 2X. But, then we bumped up to 10K, but we got like 1.5X. So their ROAs dropped. So I've taken like a more like lean approach to it and just tiered up over time. That's what's worked for us. Realistically, we could be spending more on it maybe, but it's worked. We've I think last month our retargeting ROA was around 7%, which is huge on Meta. And like acquisition ads was like 2.6. Supplement space, that's really, really good. Like if you're getting 2X in supplements, you're doing good.
Were you an athlete before you got into the supplement game? Was that an important part of your life?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't like a collegiate athlete or anything, but I played baseball my whole life. I've always been active, like going to the gym. I got real involved in like rock climbing and hiking, outdoor activities. So yeah, I've always been an athletic person.
So, but when you were getting started, did you you had kind of an entrepreneurial mindset from the very beginning, like you were looking for your thing right from the start, and that's really what led you in that direction. But were you somebody who was using or seeking supplements for physical fitness purposes, or were you not that serious as an athlete at that time?
Oh no, yeah, I've always been into it. I would, when I first started going to the gym and I don't know, like 14 years old, 14, 15 years old, I would mow lawns and spend all the money on protein powder and creatine. So it started from an early age.
I was spending money on other things at 14 and 15.
Yeah, I mean it's and I'm still that way today. We have like a whole like two cabinets in our kitchen that are full of supplements that my wife's like, why do you have all this shit? So yeah, I mean I'll be involved in it heavy until I croak at hopefully 120.
Do you feel like a lot of the people who are trying to break into supplements as a job, um, do you feel like they're coming from that perspective of being athletes and seeking that edge? Like, is that where a lot of those new entrepreneurs are coming from?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know a ton of like a lot of younger people that's in the same industry that's in a startup. I do work close with a few. And yeah, they're both athletes into it, but as far as, knowing how their story compares to mine or like how in depth they are with it, I'm unsure.
Well, the reason I ask is that, again, from my sort of outside uh, observations about the audience that we have that are into it, it seems like one of those things that a person, they need it, they want to use it, they spend a certain amount of time researching for their own purposes, to figure out what's best for them, and then as some time passes, they begin to see it as an opportunity to, do something for themselves. And I think that's true of a lot of stuff in the athletic space, even gym ownership or coaching or apparel development and all of that sort of thing. It just seems like that's a natural path that a lot of people come to. But regardless of which one of those things it is, like if you're printing t-shirts or if you're trying to make something that's a larger scale business, um, I suspect that a lot of those barriers come into place with your ability to persevere, be disciplined, and be tenacious with in ways that aren't don't necessarily translate one to one with being successful as an athlete. There's a different sort of mindset that you have to adopt to be successful at those two different things, even though they're really closely related to each other. So that's what I was curious if you've seen a lot of people try to make those transitions and struggle in that way.
Yeah. I mean, I won't mention any names, but like, I know an athlete that was, competitive professional athlete, and, they'll go from, being super successful in their sport or their craft. But like you said, it's a totally different game when you get into being successful in business or as an entrepreneur. Sometimes if you're super successful as an athlete, or let's just say like a fitness influencer, that you may not be successful in managing and running a business because it's a totally different world. So yeah, I mean, I've seen it and I think it's tough, but um, having a competitive mindset, and putting your all in, I think that if when you transition into entrepreneurship, if you realize, hey, this is still going to be a challenge, they obviously you can be successful in it. You just kind of have to change what tactics you do. But ultimately, you're still going to have to put in work at the end of the day, whether it's business or whether it's a sport.
So would you say that for you personally, you have a similar mindset and a similar approach to the challenges you face in your personal life and your business life?
Yeah, 100%. For me, it's like, hey, if and I welcome the challenges. I didn't used to be that way, but it's the stuff that you have to deal with in business, and just in your personal life, just to say like in your marriage, like if you take the lessons from both of those, you can apply them to one or the other. If you're struggling with communicating with, let's say, a potential new distributor in a country, and you know communication barriers are tough. Sometimes people communicate different and you may come off like they're being an asshole to you, and you kind of want to react to it. You're like, hey, you're not going to talk to me that way. Same thing in a marriage. Me and my wife, when we've been married for going on close to 7 years, and we had both been divorced. So when we got married, we went to counseling for almost a year, just to help us communicate better. Not that we were having a ton of problems, but we were like, hey, we both know that we've dealt with shit and have like wounds from childhood and past marriages and insecurities. And we don't know how to talk to each other about those without getting defensive when we feel like we're getting attacked. So, we went and sought help to learn how to be better communicators. So, the lessons I've learned from that and learning to communicate better with my spouse helps me communicate better with people in business. It helps you solve problems without losing your shit. When if you didn't know how to communicate, it's difficult. If you hadn't been through that and you don't know, for me, I would be more reactive in the past, to whereas now I'll sit there and assess and think about it and then respond in a way that can continue on the conversation or come up with a solution without everybody losing their head over it.
Yeah, it sounds like having a healthy family life is makes a complete life, and whether that's necessarily a perfect translation for everybody or not, it sounds like something that for you there's got to be the scales have got to be sort of equaled out in order for you to maintain a healthy mindset as you approach all of those things. Um, has have did you develop that as in your wizened 30s, late 30s, or I guess that would have been your early 30s whenever you were making those decisions? Do you have to learn those lessons the hard way?
Yeah, yeah, I did. But I was just talking to my wife the other day, and I was like, 10 years ago, I don't know if me and her would have been able to get along. And she said the same thing. She's like, I think that, we were probably both so bullheaded that we never would have been able to meet each other somewhere in the middle to kind of, you know, continue to grow with each other just because we weren't willing to hear anybody because you're just so stubborn. So yeah, I mean, it's looking back over it, it's like, man, how much stuff could you have not had to deal with or go through, or what relationship would you still have if you were able to communicate better? Uh, so I mean, it's crucial, and I think that's super important, especially if you're married and you have children, because life gets busy. Running a company, and that was an issue for us. First couple years of our marriage was that you get so involved in your work and your tasks that you can just work all day, all night, and kind of overlook your family's needs. And I've been guilty of it. Sometimes I'm still guilty of, not putting the phone down when I should at night. When I'm trying to, have a conversation with my wife, uh, and that's difficult, but you have to have boundaries on different areas in your life.
Where have you found what would have been some of the best boundaries that you've set to help delineate between work and personal life?
Yeah, I mean, we've got to the point to where a certain time that we just hey, it's like no work. Like we've come to an agreement. Hey, at 6 o'clock we're done working. Don't answer emails. Like, don't try to give someone a price on something. Don't go put an order through to fulfillment.
Mm.
And it's tough, because sometimes what if you get like a massive order from a new client? You're like, oh, let's go do this. But and you have to be fluid with it sometimes. Like if there's a big task coming up, you're like, but it goes back to communication. Be like, hey, I know we have this thing, but I don't have any other option. I may have to work till 7 o'clock tonight, and it's fine. So I think as long as you have an open communication with your spouse, you can have leverage on things. So it's like, hey, is it okay if I work a little extra today? Because my wife does that too. She started her own business, and sometimes she'll have calls or meetings that are after 6 o'clock, and I'm like, hey, yeah, that's fine. Thanks for letting me know. And then setting a date night. You at least need to be doing that once a month, if not every single week, with your spouse. And that's like tonight. We have no kids here, so we're Friday night. We're going on a date.
Nice. Yeah, it's great to have that partner that helps you to keep from running down the overwork like rabbit hole, because that's definitely something that I've been guilty of in the past, and it's good to sort of, um, even if it's not as explicit as like 6 p.m. every night, but there's just that general communication about like, hey, this is where the line is for an acceptable amount of work, and then to have that back and forth about like, hey, this particular weekend or this particular night, like, we've got this big thing happening. We've got to make a modification to what normal would be.
Yeah.
Austin, what do you consider to be your greatest success in life?
Honestly, it doesn't have anything to do with business or entrepreneurship, for me, kind of the whole driving force behind everything that I've done and the choices that I've made is to, have a family that I'm proud of because growing up, I didn't have it and I didn't want my kids to have that. Now, granted, a divorce did happen, but my relationship with my kids are super strong. I talk to them every day. They're doing really well. Like they do great in school. They're like super intelligent children. So, for me, that's probably one of my biggest successes is what I would say is that, I've given my children a path and I've kind of set them on the right path to know what to do. Whereas for me, it was, you know, I didn't have it. I had to seek it out.
Yeah, well, and I really commend you for that because, again, I spent my teenage years in a very unhealthy household where there was abuse and there was substance abuse and really just, I was loved, but I was around people that were not paying attention to what my future might be and we're not making those active decisions as a parent. That I'm not a parent, but I look back now and see like, yeah, nobody was sitting down and like changing their perspective to make sure that I was going to wind up in a certain place. And so for you to have gotten a hold of that at a young age and saw what was going on and not just sort of fallen into the mold that you were placed in, that's really something that you should be proud of because it is such a hard thing to do. Um, what do you think's the hardest thing you've ever had to do in your life?
I think it's kind of on like a personal level for me. It's just kind of accepting, that I had scars that I need to deal with, man, like childhood trauma. And I didn't want to face the demons that I had with that. I told myself that there was really nothing wrong with me, that it wasn't that bad, and it didn't really affect me. Uh, but it did, and I think actually having the courage as a man to be like, you know, like there's some shit that I dealt with that has, you know, fucked me up for a long time. And until I was able to be open about it, and emotional about it and talk to someone about like, hey, I've struggled with this or this because of this reason. Um, yeah, so that was probably one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do is to be like truly vulnerable, um, personally like that. That's tough. That's tough work. A lot of people are unwilling to do it. I was unwilling to do it for a long time because, I had the perception that if I exposed that, it was weakness and, it would make me less of like a father or a husband or a man in that aspect. When in reality, actually letting go of that and healing from it has made me 10 times the person I was before.
It's it's really a common sort of expression. What you're expressing now is something that a lot of people who have been able to make that leap will say. That they had to recognize their internal response to getting close to that wounded place inside of them, moving through that response and working it out, and how they can look back and say, I felt like it was a threat to my masculinity to express any of those things or to even acknowledge them. And the it isn't when you're going through that, you're not listening to such a clear dialogue in your mind. It's not like you've got these voices that are saying, I'm wounded. No, that's my masculinity. That's not what it is. These are very primal things inside of you in the human psyche that's trying to protect you. And, God knows what else our ancestors needed 200,000 years ago to make it through the trauma of their existence that's still floating around inside of our unconscious minds. And the one of the recurring themes in a lot of folk stories and mythologies is the the hero that's got to return home. A hero goes out. It's the hero's journey. It's a little bit of a trope, stuff from Joseph Campbell. The hero goes out into the waste, finds the jewel, which is discovering his inner strength, or discovering who he really is, and then he returns back home from the wasteland. And part of the hero's journey is that he's rejected at home for what he's brought. Like he feels like he's discovered something powerful, but when he returns home, he's bringing it back to people who probably haven't taken that journey and who don't understand and who reject that message as a result of that. And so one of the next things that's got to happen in the process of maturing as a man is being able to find a way to reach people, and looking inside of yourself and being able to relate, and being able to say, my greatest strength isn't my ability to enter into confrontations, and it's not my ability to win a contest against these people. My greatest strength is finding a way to connect with them, and finding a way to relate to them, and finding a way to communicate with them, so that I've grown, so they grow, so that our community grows, our family grows, and we all benefit from what I've gained from my struggles in the outside world. That's a massive part of masculinity, fatherhood, all of that sort of stuff. But it's a really difficult thing to do. That's why it gets encoded into mythology, because it's a massively difficult part of the human experience that if you're living your life deliberately and you sincerely want to have a good life, you sincerely want to have a healthy family, that you're going to have to come to that place. And it's not an easy thing to do. It is vulnerable.
Yeah, it is. And, for me, and I've open about this 100%, because I talked to multiple guys who've struggled with it too, but for years, I mean, 10 plus years, like I struggled with anxiety, like debilitating at times, to where I had to go get to bed. Um, and that sucks as a guy, to not be able to deal with stressors at times. And sometimes you don't even know what the hell you're anxious about. You're like, why the hell do I feel like I'm going crazy? And I was even on medication for it for a few years, because it got so bad. But I'm telling you, after I did all of that internal work and got all that shit cleared out and stopped, carrying that baggage for so long, uh, it just went away. Like I'll still experience some anxiety sometimes if I'm super stressed or busy, but it's gone, to the point, to where I'm like, I don't even know how did I struggle with that for so long, for so many years? And just, by addressing the shit that I didn't want to address and working through it, it changed my life. And it's sad, because I feel like if people would just do that, so many people's lives would be better. But it's more difficult to face that than it is to just deal with a condition like anxiety for the rest of your life.
So I'm probably going to misquote this, but Jung once wrote that no tree can reach heaven whose roots don't touch hell. And the for a lot of very strong people, they will not be able to realize who they truly are and really enjoy life and really experience life to its fullest until they have experienced the worst inside of themselves, and they've acknowledged it, and they don't cover it up with a substance. They don't look for the answer at the bottom of a bottle. They don't try to bury it through external stimulation of any sort. They sit down and acknowledge it as a problem and don't fight anymore and stop and have a sensible approach to it and say, like, what is it? What do I do? What do I need to connect with inside of myself that's going to answer this voice that's hurting so bad? And again, I commend you for taking those steps, and I commend you for your willingness to talk about it, which is another hard thing to do. But I'm really impressed with your openness in general. You're an easy guy to talk to. You definitely, have the appearance of somebody who would be the lead singer in a death metal band.
I get that all the time. Cause I live in Nashville, so if I'm at the airport and let's say I'm early and I'll stop in one of the little restaurants or the bars or whatever, they'll be like, "Oh man, are you a musician?" Like, bro, no.
You're like, "Hey man, let me hear your demo tape."
Like, I can't play an instrument to save my life. Yeah, it's either that or, Jason Momoa. It's funny. Roman Reigns, I get that all the time. He's like a wrestler. It's hilarious.
Yeah, I think we got to put, like, when we post to YouTube, our interview with Aquaman or something to help get additional views.
Right.
Do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's where'd you grow up?
I grew up. So, how familiar are you with Tennessee?
Not very. I know where it is on a map.
So I personally live in Clarksville, Tennessee, which is real close to Fort Campbell Army Base. So it's more of a military city. But I grew up in a place called Greenbrier, Tennessee, which is about 40 minutes from where I live currently. Still about 45 minutes from Nashville at the moment.
So is it like a suburb? Okay, small town.
Yeah, there's like one red light there.
Gotcha. Yeah, again, I can relate to that. But, well, you definitely have the presence of sitting down and, chatting with a normal down to earth guy. Not that there's any reason to expect that you wouldn't be, but again, you look like you're in a death metal band and you're head of a nutrition supplement company. So, I think that one does not expect you necessarily to be quite as humble and open as you are. So that's been very refreshing. And I think that it sounds like you've earned a lot of your success in life by being willing to sort of like be yourself, be open, let people in, sticking to that humility. I think that's a very noble way to go about it. So I really appreciate the opportunity that you've given us to open up a little bit and to share your story with people, because I do think that a lot of people are going to appreciate that. And I think that a lot of our followers who are in that athlete influencer entrepreneurial space, I think there's some lessons to learn from that, and I hope that they'll get a lot out of it. So we're really grateful to you for your time today.
Yeah, man, appreciate it. It's a pleasure. Honor to be on the show, and congrats to you guys for getting it off the ground. And it's great. I enjoy doing it. I've done this is probably my 10th or 11th podcast interview. Started doing them, man, years ago. When I was just getting into entrepreneurship. I haven't listened to those interviews in a long time. They're probably terrible. Yeah, it's been great.
Well, my advice to you is don't listen to him. As somebody who's been listening to himself for like 20 hours at a time when he didn't know what he was doing at the first interview, I'd say steer clear of him. You'll be a happier man.
Hey, that's the problem. Is like one of the things too about video is, when Kyle would send me like snippets of it, I'm like, God, man, I sound like such a hick. Like my accent is such a draw. It's so bad. And he's like, no, man, it's actually super cool. Like I love it. And I'm like, I just can't listen to myself speak. Like it's so weird. I don't know if you guys have dealt with that too. When you hear yourself, it's like, oh God, that's so cringe to hear yourself talk.
Yep.
Austin, how can people connect with you on the internet?
Yeah, so any of the social platforms. I'm on Instagram, a.hulsey, Hulsey, Facebook too. You can follow my brand, Nutrifitt Labs, on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. But I won't be commenting on there if you reach out on TikTok. And then our website is nutrifit.com, nutrifitt.com.
Excellent. Well, of course, we'll link all of that stuff down in the usual places. Austin, thank you again for your time today. And I'd like to thank everybody who's spent their time with us listening. We really appreciate it.
So thanks, guys.